Francesco Abruzzino with the Uncensored Report. I want to talk a little bit about the war on terror and how we've been helping it to flourish versus trying to control it, and what needs to be done. If you go back to 2001 when you had Bush, he was out there, he was talking about this whole war on terror and how we in the United States, the politicians, the president, and everybody, our Western allies, what we have to do, what we have to achieve. And they went on, they basically went with the same narrative, they paraphrase exactly the same thing out to the public to try to convince their populace that this was a good thing. You know, I was reading this article and they refer to it as the Long War, which it has been. This has been an ongoing occupation. We've been in Afghanistan for the longest time. This is our longest armed conflict in American history. Also, we have troops in Iraq. For 14 years, we've had troops in Iraq. And ever since Obama came in and just pulled them out, it created this vacuum, which ISIS filled up. And if you look at the whole ambiguous nature of this whole war on terror, you got these politicians out there. And they've gotten a lot of room to maneuver by selling this to the public. And they often will take away a lot of our freedoms, a lot of our liberties, and they'll go out and wage more wars for the industrial war complex, all under the guise that it's this war on terror. They're out there fighting for our well-being. You know, they get the wealth, the power. It's all channeled through these hands that got themselves involved in it. And the war on terror has been a success for many politicians, the industrial war complex, and many business out there. But a lot of innocent lives have been lost. And if you look at who's really behind it, I did a rant the other day because they came out with these 7 countries that are on the temporary pause list. And I think Trump's supposed to come out with a new revised one today. And if you look at the list, Saudi Arabia and Qatar aren't on there. Qatar is known for funneling a ton of money to ISIS and to extremist groups, and so is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has they fund madrasas and mosque networks throughout the earth, everywhere, throughout their country, throughout the Western Europe powers, everywhere. You got these madrasas, these mosques that indoctrinate extremism. And not every mosque out there does this, but these particular ones with the Wahhabism do. They serve as excellent recruiting stations out there. And they operate under the explicit knowledge of the Western powers in the United States, in Europe, throughout the world. In Denmark, the story that I was reading today, they talked about this one mosque in Aarhus, which it openly serves as a recruiting station for militants who go out and fight abroad in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, fighting these proxy wars for Saudi Arabia on their behalf. Yemen's a proxy war. Syria's a proxy war where they're fighting Iran. And these mosques are backed and protected by the U.S. and European allies and Saudi money, Saudi political influence, which that's the world. You can go back and look at WikiLeaks and even our own United States Defense Intelligence Agency. They put out documents which essentially expose the role of the West, us, the United States, the Englands of the world, the Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and how the explicit role we've played in funding, training, and helping these militants to flourish on the battlefield. One of the primary areas which really took over was Syria. Again, that was all over that pipeline. They wanted to bypass Russia. Assad said no. He had a friendship with Russia. Next thing you know, we're sitting in arming militants to go in there. You know, Obama tried to say, well, we're going to arm the moderate militants. There are no moderates. I said that back then. There were no moderates because I followed it closely. This whole terrorism thing is a deliberate product of our foreign policy. If you think about it, it all stems from a lot of the actions, a lot of the nation building that the United States and the West has been behind. It's a means of fighting these different proxy wars. Like I said, for Saudi Arabia. What they do is they stir up divisiveness, hatred, fear, hysteria, which we have now, Islamophobia. You know, you got this travel ban. And people know, let's put a ban out there. It'll stroke controversy. It'll distract the public from stuff, from the reality of what is driving this whole terrorism war out there. All terror attacks across the West, are essentially funded through Qatar, through Saudi Arabia. And most of these people, this article made an interesting point, very interesting. They said, look, most of these attacks, a high percentage of them, they'll come out, the countries, France, Belgium, whoever it is, and they'll say, well, we've known about these people. They've been on our radar. Yet somehow they still let these individuals follow through with these attacks. Why? Have you ever thought about that? And it made me think, yeah, that is interesting. They all know these people. Almost every single one out there, they've known who they were. So do we need a pause? I still think we do, because I want to make sure we have a vetting system that's in place. A lot of people say it's not solid. There's something there. It just needs a lot of work. And I think a pause is okay until we do that. But it makes you think, doesn't it? So we got the United States and Europe, and we're out there. And basically, this article, and I almost have to agree, that using terror as a form of foreign policy, pushing it out there. And it's something that Bush and Obama both pushed vigorously. And there's concerns now that, will Donald do that? I don't know. Donald's saying, hey, I'm coming after these guys. I'm not going to fund ISIS. We're going to take these guys down. So it's yet to be seen. And while we remain in these countries, we remain in Afghanistan, we remain in Iraq, and yes, in Syria, and yes, in Yemen. A lot of people aren't aware of that. Fighting these wars against these ideological, politically driven extremists out there, funded by Saudi Arabia. And that's why I said, why isn't Saudi Arabia or Qatar on this list? So what do we need to do? And a lot of people say, well, get out there. You need to educate people. Educate the public that it's just a small minority. And it is a small minority of Muslims that are out there doing it. Not every Muslim's a bad person. You need the Muslim community to step up. We need pressure on Saudi Arabia and Qatar to stop funding these guys. If Donald Trump is serious and he's not going to back ISIS or Al-Qaeda or al-Nusra or any of these extremist groups, he's got to do something to cut this terror basket off. This terror basket of funds that continues to flow from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and many of these other countries. And think about it. And I hope Donald Trump is serious. And I hope that our American foreign policy no longer includes the fight against terrorism. I hope it goes away and it will no longer be used to take away our liberties, our rights. A lot of concerns there. This has been Francesco Abruzzino with the Uncensored Report.